Hello and welcome back to Decimal Learning Series. Today in the types of fraction category, we'll be learning about equivalent decimals. Before we begin, let's quickly discuss the difference between equal and equivalent. Equal means two things are exactly the same in all aspects: quantity, value, measure or degree. Whereas equivalent means similar but not identical. They have the same value but may look different. For example, 2 is equal to 2, but 2 is equivalent to 1 plus 1. One more example, 5 is equal to 5. 5 is equivalent to 2 plus 3 or 1 plus 4. Even though the numbers are different, both the expressions result in the same value. When learning about equivalent decimals, how can we forget equivalent fractions? Both go hand in hand, just like a fraction and a decimal shaking hands. Recall what you have learned about equivalent fractions: 1 by 2, 2 by 4, 3 by 6 and 4 by 8. All these are equivalent fractions, and after this comes 5 by 10. When you simplify 5 by 10, you get 1 by 2, which is its simplest fraction form. Now if you convert 1 by 2 into decimal, we get 0.5. You have seen this before in fraction versus decimal comparisons. Both represent the same value, just in different forms. Now take 0.5. It can be written in multiple ways using fractions. 5 by 10. We keep multiplying both the numerator and denominator by 10 to create equivalent fractions, but the value remains the same. Here you can see 0.5 represented as 5 out of 10 parts. 5 parts shaded out of 10 parts. And 5 upon 10, if you multiply the numerator and the denominator by 10, you will get 50 by 100, 500 by 1000. No matter how we write it, the decimal value remains unchanged. Let us try to understand how. Let us explore the different ways of writing equivalent decimals. Take 5 by 10, 5 out of 10 parts. If you take the place value chart, 0 is in ones place, then decimal point, 5 is in the tens place, that is 0.5. Now take 50 by 100, 50 out of 100 parts. See the place value chart. You get 0 in ones place, decimal, and then 5 in the tens place and 0 in the hundreds place, and the result is 0.50. Next take 500 upon 1000. 500 parts out of 1000 parts, and in the place value chart you can represent it in this particular way. In decimal form it is 0.500. Now all these are showing the same proportion of shading. No matter how we write it, the decimal value remains unchanged. Let's clear up a common confusion: the difference between trailing zeros after a decimal and zeros immediately after the decimal point. First, let us take a look at zeros immediately after the decimal point. In 0.05, the zero right after the decimal is important. It affects the place value. Here 5 is in the hundreds place and not the tens place. So 0.05 is not equal to 0.5. Now what about the trailing zeros after decimal? In 0.5, 0.50 and 0.500, the extra zeros do not change the value. These are all equivalent decimals because they represent the same quantity. Just like 5 by 10 is equal to 50 by 100 is equal to 500 by 1000. 0.5 is equal to 0.50 is equal to 0.500. Trailing zeros only serve to express precision, while zeros right after the decimal point determine the actual value. Do you remember what we discussed in like and unlike decimals? If not, let's quickly recall. When working with decimal, it's often helpful to convert unlike decimals to equivalent forms to make them easier to compare or work with. You have learned like decimals have the same number of decimal places. 0.35 and 0.78 are like decimals because they have same number of decimal places, whereas 0.3 and 0.250 are unlike decimals because they have different number of decimal places. Now here is an interesting part. Unlike decimals can also be equivalent decimals. For that we can take an example. 0.3, 0.30, 0.300. They are unlike and also they are equivalent decimals. The trailing zeros don't change the value. When comparing or adding unlike decimals, we often convert them into like decimals by adding zeros to make them easier to work with. Equivalent decimals work just like equivalent fractions. They help us add, subtract, compare, and understand values easily. In like and unlike decimals, you have learned how they are helpful while comparing, adding, and subtracting. We'll be doing all these topics in detail. Stay tuned for grade 6 math test paper 4 and next video on decimals. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you'll come to know when I post my next video.